for 2 hours.
Once the script was underway, David and John Box packed their bags for a 10,000-mile location scouting expedition. Finding locations proved especially difficult because, as you can see from the sketches John Box drew before production began, Zhivago covers so many places, so many years, and all the seasons.
You can't create a landscape, you've got to find it and make it work. There's certain basic principles about Dr. Zhivago. It is set in Russia. That's a big country. The scale is critical for telling this very particular story. And then there's the practical issue. You've got to have locomotives, steam locomotives. You've got to have a lot of horses. You're going to need a lot of fine riders. And it's a film, because Russia's a big place, there's a lot of people there. You need big crowds.
Discharges. Replacements.
We started in Yugoslavia. Had a film business, had studios, had steam locomotives. It did not feel right. And this word feel is very important because it's atmosphere. It's not just sets or location. You've got to create a world in which actors play out those parts. And you've got to help the actors. It does help them if you get it right. We next moved north, Finland and Sweden, obviously for winter and for snow. But they didn't have the studios, this, that, and the other we would require because we were a big movie. So back I come to David and tell him it won't work. This question, John, where are we going to make this film? And I looked him straight in the eyeball and said, Spain.
Spain offered studio facilities within easy reach of landscapes that Zhivago would need.
It has the size, it has the scale we require, it has the locomotives. It has extras, it has sophisticated construction and technical people there. And it would look excellent on the screen.
And Moscow rose anew outside Madrid.
It was here, on this 10-acre site in the small Madrid suburb called Cañas, that John Box recreated Zhivago's Moscow. It took 18 months and 800 workers to construct the giant set. The Kremlin dominated streets that even featured 2 working trolley lines. The architecture and even the window dressing were all painstakingly researched and recreated.
It was incredible because the 2 streets, there was the big street, the beautiful street, and then there were the poor street where Laura lived. And there were 2 streets that were parallel. And all the houses, you know how mostly film sets, they're just, you look behind them and they're bits of sticks coming out. All the houses were real houses. All the interiors of our house, the Gromyko house, were shot on that set.
With a horse-drawn sleigh, the bygone Moscow of the early 1900s makes a striking setting for photographers and journalists from all corners of the world who come to photograph and interview Geraldine Chaplin.
For the scenes in the countryside, the production moved 150 miles north of Madrid to Soria. Here's Julie sunning herself while we wait to shoot the wagon caravan scene.
It was unbelievable. So you'd be outside on this plain in Soria. So hot, I can't tell you, not a tree, nothing, except the false trees, which were for the film.
Soria was also where Dr. Zhivago's most recognizable set was built, the hauntingly beautiful Ice Palace.
The amazing thing in that picture to me is the Ice Palace, which is made out of beeswax. I mean, John Box, the designer, was incredible on that picture.
Highly emotional. these two key characters come back there, and they go in. What are they going to find in there? I didn't really know how to handle it, but then I suddenly saw some reference of Scott's last days in the Antarctic in the room, and it showed quite a small hole, and the wind had blown the snow and ice through it, and the snow and ice had made strange shapes, and that gave me my clue. Take the set. It's going to be a bit unreal, but it's going to be real at the same time. Ice it up. And I go to Eddie Fowley, props, special effects and everything. We just did it very simply. We had very hot white wax. Eddie went round with a bucket and a big mug, and he threw it all over the architecture, the furniture and everything else. When I thought it looked right, I hit it with nearly freezing water with a pump, so it just froze. And you dabbed a bit of mica on the later and that sort of thing. Seemed to work. It had an effect on the actors.
We needed to shoot in that particular place the 4 seasons. So we had to shoot scenes where it was winter, all snowed up. We had some spring scenes, so we had the special effects had to put leaves on the trees and paint them green and put flowers. And then we had the autumn, and then they went to paint the leaves in the autumn colors. So it was all done by hand, literally.
One morning we'd come in and it would be spring. I don't know how, they'd like fairies. And next day, because we were doing all the stuff that was shot there at one go, next day we'd come in, it'd be autumn. They'd sprayed the trees, pulled up the plants. Next day it would be winter. Snow on the ground, icicles hanging.
And there were scenes shot up there when the temperature was over 100 Fahrenheit, which were snow scenes. But there was awful problems with the landscape at the back. We had to roll out miles of white plastic and cover it with white marble dust. And we had to pay attention to the details of frosting up close shots.
For the scenes showing my escape from the Red troops, David wanted us to really feel the cold of inner Russia. So he took me and the crew to Finland, near the Arctic Circle and 10 miles from the Russian border. And instead of having the Spanish army as extras, we used Lapland gypsies. Here we also celebrated David's 57th birthday. One thing about the location, we didn't have to act cold here. It was often 40 degrees below.
We could not do big scenes, so it had to be small scenes. But we very much wanted, with our artificial winter, to get a bit of real winter into it. It helped. It was just 2 weeks to get a bit of what you might call as near to Russia as we could get.
But what they hadn't worked out, accurately I mean, is the thickness of the ice. Now, it was very cold. Presumably the ice was very thick. And we had these kitchens set up, trucks cooking and making tea all day and coffee. And everybody had a heater, you know, for between scenes. We used to sit and put something to heat ourselves. And so what was happening is every day the ice was melting. But we didn't realize quite. And those kitchen trucks kept getting lower and lower. And at some point there was, somebody said, hey, wait a minute, you know, this thing we could all go right through the ice. And they stuck a thing in to see how much was left. And there wasn't that much left. I mean, it was time to move.
Test 12, take 1.
Shooting began in December 1964 and continued through October of 1965. We did the funeral scene first, and David cast my own son Tarek to play the part of young Yuri. David chose Nicholas Rogue, a brilliant English cameraman, to be the cinematographer on Zhivago. Nick had been a second-unit cameraman on Lawrence. But Lean's demanding sense of aesthetics soon ended their collaboration.
Nick Rogue was the first cameraman, and he was wonderful, but they didn't get on. Nick Rogue had his ideas of how certain scenes should be shot, and David Lean, I overheard one thing once where David Lean was saying, I want all the ugliness done in beautiful light. I want all the killings, that killing in the cornfield of those poor boys who are just schoolboys, military school. He said, I want that to be beautiful, to be dazzling, to be rich, to be light for a love scene. And I want the love scenes in horrible, cold. He wanted the contrast. And Nick Roeg couldn't, he wanted to light the love scenes, oh, so beautifully and soft. He said, no, I want them hard. And they fought and fought about that, about the moods. And eventually one day there was, and Nick Roeg was out and Freddie Young was in.